Hello, and welcome to the Monday night guest stream. Obviously, this is pre-recorded. Me and Adam will hang out in the chat if anyone wants to say anything, but any questions for this time won't be asked live. But we are joined today by Emma. Emma, do you want to tell the audience a bit about yourself?
Hello, I'm Emma Vieceli, and I'm currently a slobby mess, which is why I'm not on video, like a terrible, cowardly person. But yeah, I'm coming to you live from Cambridge. I'm not live, that's a lie. Coming to you pre-recorded from Cambridge. I am a comicer, as probably most people who you get to chat to are. Came in through independent stuff, and even now I like to juggle between working on licensed work and working on my own stuff. And I believe that comics should be for anyone, about anything, and by anyone, which handy acronym is FAB. That's my pitch. Elevator pitch for me. I'm sure we'll go into more detail as we go through.
That's really cool. How did you get into? How did you discover comics?
So the first question normally. So there's a kind of combination. I always say with this, there's a difference between when I discovered comics as a reader and when I discovered comics as being something that I wanted to make. I think for a lot of us, there's like two different parts of our life. So initially, I'm very lucky in that I am obviously I live in England now. My father's family is Italian. My aunt married a Japanese man, so I was really lucky growing up that I had this influx of both Italian fumetti and Japanese manga. So I was kind of, surrounded by lots of different things. And as well as that, I loved my Garfield and my Beano. And then I got into the X-Men and fell in love with Gambit, the usual stuff. And so as a result, I grew up with a real cross-section of art styles and storytelling. But the very first thing I ever read that I remember, other than stuff like Bunty, there were comics in Bunty and things. But the first thing I remember caring about is my mum had all the really old collected editions of Hey BC and Peanuts. And so I used to read those, like they were falling apart. They were already falling apart from when my mum used to read them, and then I just finished the job by reading them over and over. But that was like super young, just getting in, and I would try and draw Charlie Brown and stuff. And then there was sort of a point where I can't remember which order things came in, but I got obsessed with two sides. It was like Dylan Dog was the Italian comic that really got to me. I freaking love that comic and recommend it to anyone. I wish more of it was translated. So little of it was translated, and I don't understand why. And then I obviously, fell for X-Men as well. So I think it was kind of a combo of Dylan Dog and X-Men. That was me as a comics reader. I also went through the Asterix, never Tintin, always Asterix for me, phase. But then there was a point when someone loaned me the first graphic novel, the box tree edition back then, that's how long ago it was, of Ranma Half, Rumiko Takahashi's Ranma Half. And that was the first time I saw something and went, not only do I love this, I want to try drawing this. I think reading stuff like X-Men and Dylan Dog, these were masterpieces made by gods. They fell from trees. Like, you can't make this. And not that Ranma is any less of a masterpiece, but there was just something in that line work that I just had to try and emulate it. I wanted to try and draw it. So that was like my awakening as someone who wanted to make comics. So I'd say in terms of my sort of avenues in, it was that. I drew and I doodled. I actually only started making comics quite late. I used to draw characters and I would write stories and I would read comics, but I hadn't thought of putting them all together really until I met the guys who I would then go on to form Sweat Drop with. Well, they were formed just before I joined. And actually, they were the ones who said, "Oh, you appear to have a story breakdown and you have characters drawn. Why haven't you drawn them as comics?" And I was like, "Oh, I can do that." Then I haven't stopped drawing them since.
Fortunately for us. You say that's quite unique. We had Janica Airfreda on
Oh,
a
amazing,
little while back, and she has the exact same experience being obviously from Italy. She has the European comics, and she was the manga and the Americana that came along as well. So
and was
it's nice that you
also
had the same.
and was also recommending Dylan Dog.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I'm sure, as Jenica would have said, or any other Italian creators you spoke to, I mean, the industry in Italy is just, it's so different. Being over there, every newsagents, you'd have like street stands where you pick up your newspapers. They've all got your latest Dylan Dog, Nathan, whatever the new things that are out, books of manga. Like, it's just so common there. My nonno, my grandfather, used to read Tex, which is another Bonelli comic. It was about a cowboy. And I remember him sitting on the deck chair in the garden reading his comics. It was just so normalized. It wasn't, ooh, I'm the strange grandchild, I want my comics now. They were just like, oh, yeah, comics are totally normal. Whereas over here, it was still a bit sort of, I'm going to go and buy my X-Men comic now,
Brown paper bag, please.
Yeah, top shelf, thank you.
I remember, it's that weird thing, like, I guess it's Western cultures that get that point where you're ashamed of your comics. And I remember being on a bus. I was on my way on a trip somewhere, and I was secretly reading, like, down the side of the seat, my pile of Beanos on the bus, and it was
No.
I think I must have been about 10, and I'm just secretly reading my Beano while I'm on a bus of all these people, so that they didn't know that I read comics.
That shame with something as innocent as the Beano.
I know. I was like being too old for comics more than like.
Oh.
I don't think there's as much awareness, and there's not much of a. Now I guess it's different, but I think there wasn't as much of a framework. You didn't know where you slotted in and what things were, what comics and what titles were suited.
Totally. I think it was just less. It's funny because it's very easy for us I use the same word that you just said. I'll say the West, and obviously it's not the West because Italy is the West, and Italy, Germany. It's much more established and normalized is the word. Comics were just fumetti were everywhere. It was just normalized. For some, I mean, myself, my family. Well, I didn't drive. I was a child. They would drive every year we drive to Italy. So we'd be driving.
Image of you. Hop in, Mum.
Just me. Let me put my platform shoes on. Let's go. We'd go through France, Belgium, Germany, and everywhere we would stop at a petrol station or whatever. My thing was I had to buy a comic. And I do remember, and this will cast a different light on your Beano story. I do remember stopping at I remember this so vividly, stopping at a services in France. And picking up, Mum and Dad by this point were just like, oh, Emma's going to get her comics. It's what she does. She gets her comics. What they didn't know is that the comic I'd picked up was so erotic. Like, it was a crazy erotic comic. You wouldn't have known from the cover. This was a French drawn. It was, I think I picked it up because I thought it looked a bit like Asterix on the front. And as soon as I opened it, you can imagine you're 15 years old. You're just like, oh, this is the best thing ever. I certainly wouldn't have felt shame.
They didn't even bother to draw the clothes.
No. So I remember hiding that one quite well from Mum and Dad, but not because it was a comic, and more because it was, for my young eyes.
I know Asterix had 2 S's in it.
But like, I did do a convention, like, behind the table selling our comic book out in Denmark, and like seeing the European take on a convention was so different to what I'm used to here. I really enjoyed myself. It was a strange convention because it was in a museum and they were celebrating comic art. Yeah. And
that sounds amazing.
It was great, but it was weird because we were like the only superhero comic there basically, and it was all like the Disney comics and Asterix, Tintin and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And the adults and kids, it was everyone.
It's weird, that little channel of water between us and the rest of Europe. Like, myself and we tell this story quite a lot because it was just funny, but there was a year where myself and Sarah McIntyre, I took her as my date for a French convention in Paris. And we've got lots of stories we'd like to tell from that weekend. But the main thing, the takeaway was, I think it was one of my first European conventions I'd been to. And I, like you, had this sort of shock of like, not just that the comics were a different style or that they were doing different storytelling, because actually myself and Sarah were there. Well, I was there with Dragonair, which fit in fine actually, and she was there with Vernon Lettuce that she was doing for DFC at the time. But what was remarkable was seeing how there were a few Brits walking around, but mostly like we were some of the only ones there. So everyone else, you had this amazing mix of congoers from like Germany, France, Italy, Switzerland, and there was a TV in the center of the room, and it was playing like anime theme tunes. And a lot of those theme tunes were the same in all the different countries in Europe. So they'd have the same tune, just different lyrics. And what would happen is Lady Oscar, or Rosa Versailles in Japan, but Lady Oscar as we knew it in Italy and in most of Europe, the theme tune would come on and you would have hundreds of these kids and adults, let's face it, kind of gathering together, arms around each other, singing in their own language, the opening tune of something that united them all together. And I remember saying to Sarah, like, I'm getting emotional because I watched this when I was in Italy. But as the English part of me, like the British part of me, looks at this and thinks, why were we not part of this? Why were we not able to sing along with these things? We interestingly, so I'm totally tangenting from comics here. This is what I mean. You've got to rein me in.
No, it's fine.
But the cartoons that we grew up with over here that had the same theme tunes were things like 80 Days Around the World or Ulysses or any of those like collaboration. Like some of them was Spanish, Japanese, or French Japanese.
Oh, I love the Ulysses theme tune.
So those theme tunes, you would be able to go and sing the 80 Days Around the World theme tune with French or German audiences because we had exactly the same tune because it was, these Japanese European collaboration cartoons. But yeah, beyond that, just most of the cartoons didn't even make it over here, which is so sad. So sad. Yeah. Different worlds. But it is changing a lot, as you say, I think it's way more normalized here, partly because, most of us nerds, a lot of my friends are now parents and the kids are growing up with comics all over the place. So
it was one of my daughter's 17 now, and
oh wow,
I was very young.
Honestly, you do not look like you're 17. I wasn't going to say it, but like, really?
Yeah, no, I know. No, when she was small, I'd say, oh, I do comic books and things, and she's really great. I'm hoping she illustrates, keeps on illustrating.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was like, comic books, yeah, I was trying everything. It wasn't just about superheroes. She's like, cool. And then it just clicked with her at one point. I was like,
oh, yes. I think we're going to end up with we're there going, oh, it's great because the kids today are growing up with their parents, pushing comics on them. What's going to happen is we're going to have a generation of mathematicians and scientists and sports people who are just like, oh, God, I grew up with comics everywhere. I'm just rebelling against comics.
Yeah.
What have you got in your backpack? What have you got? Just some maths books? How dare you?
Football.
Yeah. Where did you get these? My
friends were playing football. I'm sorry.
I learned it from Bill Nye.
I'm going into your school. What are your teachers telling you?
I'm one of those rare nerds who like sports as well. You could probably see a Liverpool jersey on the wall behind me.
I was frantically trying to think of a made up like a stupid sport that you like not like stupid sport, like highlight or something like that.
So there is nothing wrong with it. You know what's funny is I'm not actually very into real life sports, but sports anime and sports manga, oh my god, I'm so into that. Like literally my husband bought me a Haikyuu like volleyball kit and a volleyball and a net for my birthday and I'm like, yeah. I'm not a sporty person, but somehow as soon as you put it in a comic, oh yeah, it's great.
I know what you mean. I'm more, I guess, extreme sports and stuff. So I'm kind of pleased with the Olympics at the moment with quite a few. Well, me and Ricky are the same actually. Quite a few big skateboarding stars.
I mean, they are their own stories already, right? They're exciting enough.
Yeah.
But we've gone on quite a tangent for that, didn't we? And
I think the question was, how did I get into reading comics?
And then we ended up on sport and grinded to a halt.
We normally do this at the end, so this is going kind of fine. It's just we're a little bit further ahead than we normally do. So you said about Sweat Drop being your first foray into the industry. Then, how did you? Could you explain who?
Yeah, cool. So Sweat Drop is still going now. At the point when I first got to know everyone, so basically I went to my friend Lisa organized for us to go to just for one day. We visited a con called Minami Con. This was a year. It was a long time ago, and it was conventions to me were just things I read about in magazines. Like they were mythical events where people would gather and be nerds together. I didn't believe in them, and Lisa had booked us tickets for this Minami Con in Southampton, and we went only for one day. And like you guys will remember your first convention. It's like stepping into, and this was back in the days where like there was maybe 1 or 2 events a year to go to. So it was just stepping into another world and be like, oh my god, this is my world, my people. And like most people who doodle and write, I had no I wasn't someone who would ever go up to someone and say, I make comics. So Lisa was, for me, that person that every creative person needs, who we saw a couple of people who, what I didn't know then was that they were Sweat Drop, or the beginnings of it, and they were behind a table and they had some of their own comics, like folded and stapled, and Lisa did the whole, like, this is my friend, she draws, and I was like, shut up, you know. And we exchanged email addresses, and I think at the time they operated through Yahoo groups, and I had I can't remember, a very, very old form of web, like one of these build your own website things that was appalling, that had pictures of the characters from a story called Dragonair that I'd been playing about with for ages. And Doc, who he basically reached out and said, oh, have you thought about drawing it? So literally all Sweat Drop was back then was a group of us who were into comics. We like making our own comics. It's weird saying it now, because to any, especially younger people doing comics now, they would hear what I'm about to say and say, how is that unusual? This is completely normal. You guys may well remember there was a time when this was not so normal. Like MCM, no, that wasn't a thing. Like Thought Bubble wasn't a thing. But we decided to share the cost of a table at anime conventions. We'd put our comics on the table. We'd sell them for like 20p or whatever it was. We'd spend the night before the convention literally folding and stapling and going to the con with paper cuts all over our hands. And that was the birth of Sweat Drop. And what we made, we were super proud of. In hindsight, obviously, it's absolutely horrendous, but it was our first attempts, our early attempts. And Sweat Drop kind of kept going. Over the years, we started doing a lot of workshops and outreach, and we wanted to get more people into making comics, not just reading them. And we worked together with a lot of great organizations, actually, from like Neo Magazine to the MCM, ultimately. And it was, a lot of the focus was on running workshops and teaching. And at the same time, we got to know a lot of people through that, obviously. And we had a forum that sadly is closed now, but for years it was there as sort of the place if you were inspired by manga or anything and you wanted to come in and try making comics. There was a lot of stuff, like resources in there. And we would print our own comics alongside. And then over time it got bigger and we ended up registering as a publisher. And they're still a publisher now. I suppose we operated, if we were in Japan, we'd be called a circle. I don't think it's a thing that, I mean, nowadays, have an independent publisher isn't an unusual thing to see over here at all. But then it was something, we didn't really have anyone to look to see how to do this stuff at the time, which sounds odd to say. And I think for me, aside from telling stories, we're saying we all said, but I think the dream I kept coming back to was we knew about Comic-Con in Tokyo, the big comic convention there, and we said, wouldn't it be amazing to imagine a marketplace, a place over here where all comics, doesn't matter what they're inspired by, diary comics next to manga, next to next to X-Men, next to whatever labels you want to slap on it, all sit together and you get this, cross, just comics coming together, the barriers coming down. Because this was in a time when we'd go to certain conventions and be put over in what we'd lovingly call the manga ghetto. Like, you're in that room there, these people are over here, and never the twain shall meet. Yeah. And which was awful. That's not the way, it was a very old-fashioned way. And then I was handed the reins. MCM approached us at one point and said, well, we're thinking of introducing some, we're movies, comics, and media. This was obviously years ago before ReadPop were running it. And they said, we don't really have comics. And so I literally kind of started to introduce comics. So I created the Comic Village there. And this was all done under the Sweat Drop banner. And I pretty much did that. Going from the first event, I invited 10 friends to have tables. And then by the time I left, it was about 200 tables. And there was a point when I just looked over it and was like, this is the dream. It's here. We've made a village. And I ended up stepping back from Sweat Drop mostly because I was doing too many different things that couldn't really sit on the Sweat Drop table, and it's not what Sweat Drop wasn't really about if you were doing lots of work for other publishers. But they're still going and doing amazing stuff. And it's my roots, so I'll always be grateful and amazed at what we achieved, being part of that group.
I like that. was going to quote a cartoon then. You saw something, or you organically grew into something that you wanted to see, and I think that's commendable.
And
creating something
yeah,
that needed to be created.
and it's kind of like could see the parallels from what we were doing basically, but obviously you did it on a bigger scale.
Yeah, we were when we were writing comics, we were just this little collective, just met in the pub every now and then.
That's it. It's not like we were the only people doing it. Absolutely, there'll be lots of people doing it.
Two of our friends who they've got a Kickstarter going at the moment for cat food comics. So the Silverbeard, they started the collective after seeing about the Midlands Comics Collective. So I think it must have been around the mid 2000s where there were all these little pockets of creators getting together and trying to do stuff.
So good to see. I think it was just a movement kind of swept up. I mean, I hate dates because it tells you how old I am. But I mean, it's weird. Like Sweat Drop was happening before. We ended up working with people like Tokyo Pop to help them introduce the Rising Stars of Manga competition over here. So we've kind of seen some people come and go. And it was always just as I say, we weren't the only people doing it. Loads of people were doing it. And I think it was just connecting those dots. And of course, this is before Twitter, before Facebook. So that communication wasn't there. It was a lot harder to achieve, I guess, back then. Whereas now we're seeing it soaring. And I love that we're now in an age where a young creator or an old creator, a newer creator, can actually, like, thanks to work like what you guys are doing as well, they can say like, oh, hey, there's a convention here. I'm going to have a table and put my comic on it. And that's not an unusual thing. That's an achievable thing. And I'm so glad we reached that point. It is weird to look back at a time when that felt like something you couldn't necessarily do. And for us, I think we were, there's a whole separate conversation, but to do with what the word manga means to different people, how it's applied, what it is, that is a separate conversation. But we were very much coming up through anime and manga cons initially. So there was this idea of like this other world of comics. Which gave us just a different angle on stuff, I think, for better or worse. But but now we're in a lovely place where the walls have come down and we're all mostly one happy industry.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
I would say for people who don't go to many cons, especially creative-focused cons, you would be amazed at the stuff that's happening on, like, the independent scene in Britain. Like, outside of the big two, and all the different styles of comics that are out there. Get yourself to your local convention and have got creators and just check out some of the stuff. You'd be surprised.
Isn't there one in Swansea?
Yeah,
I've heard that. Yeah. Insert plug here.
No, I like that we seem to be. I mean, I'm keen to see the comic industry grow in whatever shape or form it does in the UK. I like that ours seems to be indie. I mean, we have British creators that do work on. It's nearly the big three now. I mean, Image, especially with like the IP that's going up to Netflix, it's almost the big three, and everything else seems to be taking its place then below it, which is fantastic. But I like that we're indie, and as you said, it's like pulling everybody up as well. I mean,
we have an incredible industry over here. I think it's difficult, and again, we will get back to me and my career soon, but these are fun conversations to have. But I think where it gets tricky is industry implies money, and as we all know, that is where the conversation breaks down a little bit. We are, as a nation, not lacking for incredible creativity and talent. Like that, as you say, if you haven't been for some reason, go to a convention, go to Swansea, and check out what's on offer. Like there's so much amazing stuff. I remember early in the days of doing Comic Village MCM, there was a large focus there on. I went into it with this naive idea. I was like, everyone will pay a low amount for their table, regardless of where they are in the industry, and it's like we all subsidize each other, and we all kind of sit on a level thing. And what it meant is you did get loads of different styles coming along, but there ended up being quite a heavy emphasis on independent stuff at MCM, which I loved. What was frustrating is when you would talk to people outside of that convention who maybe had never been to it, and they'd say, oh, but they don't do comics there, do they? And you'd be like, of course they do comics. They just don't necessarily have a focus on like Marvel and DC, but it's all comics. It's amazing how often comics fans have to use the words "it's all comics," whether we're talking about web comics or manga or certain events or indie. It's all comics. That's it. It's all comics.
Yeah, even people I know, and Bricky knows, I guess, as well. We're both civil servants, so we speak to a lot of people, and even the people I know and I speak to regularly, some anyway, are surprised that that's what that means to us. That it isn't the superheroes. As much as I love most of my pull in the comic shop, it's superheroes, but it isn't just that. There is something else that you can get. You can get your
for sure. Well, yeah, for every like Cape fan who denounces big eyes and manga, there'll be a manga fan who denounces spandex. Like there's both sides. People are like, oh, but I don't count that. And ultimately, yeah, comics is comics. And yeah.
I think saying about manga, I'm kind of weird. I like a bit of shonen, but I mostly just really like goofy slice of life stuff. It's mainly, again, this is stuff my daughter was interested in, so I got interested in.
It's like what?
Like Nichijou, Lucky Star,
Yay!
an anime that are like very similar, like Himoto Umaru-chan. Again, the Lucky Star anime as well. I don't know. I mean, people would probably call me a weeaboo, but
is Lucky Star the one with the girl who's got cancer and wants to be a singer?
Maybe? No, I know it's the blue-haired girl who's a bit of a
creep.
creep.
Sorry, I know what you mean. Sorry, yeah, I'm thinking of something.
She's creepier than her father.
Right. I mean, I don't want to say too much on this. I realize I'm so sorry, guys. I'm just going off on one, but
it's fine.
Totally
fine. the battle we used to, and I say used to because again things have changed a lot. The battle we always used to have in our hands with Sweat Drop, and certainly that I had as a creator for a while because some of my first professional work was manga Shakespeare. And my uncle is Japanese, so there's no question I'm absolutely inspired by manga. But see, previous conversation, I'm inspired by manga and Fumetti and X-Men and everything else. But we would get people very much seeing us as, oh, you do manga. And then what we started to see as damaging is that some people, would think of the word manga, and in their minds, they've decided what that is. They're not looking at our work. They've just decided it's all Pokemon, or it's all tentacle porn, or it's all this. And they know what they think it is. And I actually found myself losing a lot of work because the moment people go, oh, you do manga, we're not interested in manga. We don't publish manga. That's not something we're interested in. And it would be infuriating. So it's like, why are you dismissing an entire... And what the thing Sweatdrop used to kind of preach was that the reason Japanese comics inspired us early on, and thankfully Western comics are very much getting there now, is it was about how broad it was. It was about the fact that in manga, you could have any art style, any writing style. It could be about anything. It felt like there were no barriers. You want to spend years writing a comic about wine tasting? You do that. You do it however you want. So that was what we liked about it. And then ironically in the West, as the word picked up momentum and got quite popular, what it meant, the definition of what it meant to people got narrower and narrower and narrower. Yeah. So it was like, this word used to mean to us freedom in comics, and now it's kind of meaning you have to draw Pokemon. Like, what? How did this happen?
I think people like to try and make everything either too edgy or so hip and cool, and then it just bottlenecks things, and really, as you said, it's a broad thing.
It's got to be broad, and so now, thankfully, I think actually we've ended up, things are kind of settled. There's this nice fusion, and a lot of the big, when you think of like some of the big creators working today, I mean, certainly, even in my immediate peer group and friends, the likes of Becky Cloonan, Jamie McKelvey, we all came up through Tokyo Pop and were manga fans and have incorporated that into our work. So, yeah, so I think now we're hopefully past those days.
People don't have to question your cred.
Well, I mean, there's always going to be a reason to question our cred, but yeah.
A lot of our friends are big, like, Japanese fans of, like, Japanese media, wherever they're putting out, like, manga, anime, and games. Like, one of our friends who interacts with us on here has sent us a question for you that we'll come to later. But so we see.
Segue then. I was like,
I was going to be clever with a segue, but I got to try and sneakily get the question back up because it was a bit, so it wouldn't have been smooth.
Okay.
It wouldn't have been smooth. You're crossing questions off, but don't need to answer that.
So we normally ask, so I might as well come on to this bit now. So do you prefer traditional or digital ways of production? Do you still draw with a pencil, or?
As we're talking, I'm literally sitting here doodling away on paper. So I think when it comes to relaxing drawing, I'm still using paper all the time. But it's a good question to ask, especially right now, because anyone who's been following any of my social media has been inundated with me just posting spam after spam of stuff. Because I am pretty much 100% the digital artist when it comes to professionally. I work digitally. I use Clip Studio. I use Wacom. They have been my go-tos for many years. I think I probably only ever did maybe 2 comic issues ever in on paper. I used to pencil a lot on paper and then I'd have to scan it all in, or I'd ink some stuff and scan all that in, but then tone and everything would be digital. So there was always a digital element. And then eventually I got to the point where I was like, I'm just going to do the whole thing digitally. And then I haven't really looked back, partly because tech got better. Clip Studio, I don't know what you guys use, but it's just amazing.
I use hundreds and hundreds of notepads to write everything down in. And whatever fancy at the time. If it's pencils, pens, I will spend dozens of pounds on pens.
Yeah.
Just because I like the feel of that particular pen or pencils.
Stationery, right? So all right, that's a set. We can have a whole nother podcast on that. So I'm very much a digital artist when it comes to professionally, but I am very well, like a lot of people in my position, it helps me hit deadlines and keep on schedule because I don't have to scan, I don't have to clean up, everything's just a bit faster. You can dump things in Dropbox, it's all there and ready to go. So it's definitely slicker working that way. It's not faster. The actual process, I find, if I'm inking on paper, I'm quicker at inking because I've not got my finger over the delete key constantly. I'm not redoing everything, but the overall process is slicker digitally. But what that means is I do lose touch. Every couple of years I go through a phase of realizing, I've lost touch with paper again and this isn't good. And during lockdown, one of the things I wanted to do was kind of revisit the stuff that inspired me in the first place. And I've spent a crazy amount of money on watercolors and inks and dip pens and just playing, trying to remember how much I enjoy drawing, because I think when you do something as a job, unfortunately it's just very easy to get to the point where it feels like it is just a job, and that's sad. I don't want to feel that way about something I do love doing. I feel like I've almost been starting from ground zero again, playing with ink washes and things and being like, I don't even know what I'm doing, this is great. So it's really
this way.
Yeah. So it's really bizarre because in my job side of me, I'll be sitting at the the Cintiq working on a comic that's someone is actually going to bother printing, and I kind of know what I'm doing there. And then afterwards I'll go and sit in the conservatory and make a mess on paper and be like, oh, I'm pretending to be an artist. So it's a really bizarre living my weird dichotomy of a life.
I was going to mention the obviously because we put the post together on Facebook and all of our social media, not just us, the other guys as well, our other director and all of our helpers and stuff, committee members. But I sometimes put the post together, and I put your original post together, and I nearly, as an image, put that picture of the knees.
Oh, I do.
I love that picture. You were right.
I love that you pulled that out.
We clip everything so that they're Instagram friendly, so Facebook shares it automatically Instagram, and I was hovering over, do I crop that so it's square? And I was like, nobody will get it.
I love that. I respect so much that you, because there was something about it was just complete accident, and you can only have this on paper, right? Just the way it landed was just, those knees look.
It's why I don't draw anymore. I mean, I draw, but I doodle, but I know the science of drawing, but what comes out of it, I just like when you look at, like you said, like the knees. When you see an artist, I think when you said about Ranma, and you said about the look of it.
Yeah.
There's something I love. Like I've got Otomo. I've got what's he called?
Katsuhiro Otomo. Akira.
Yeah, Akira. Hiding behind Ricky there. And I love that super detailed work. But when you see, it's kind of like it was Scott McCloud explaining in his comic.
Oh yes, how
comic,
we see faces everywhere.
Things down. Yes, and you boil things down, and the more simplified it is. But I think it's also, I mean, there's obviously that with something a little bit more chibi, it's a little bit more adorable, a little bit more appealing. But if you boil things down, and they still look perfect. You wonder how did they do that? You do thousands of lines to hide the mistakes, but if you just do one, how did you draw that? And I
Oh,
just
big
obsess about
time.
that.
I love that. I love looking at it's interesting you said the science of drawing. I do get a bit I love to get into like deep philosophical conversations about what drawing means to people and like how people the kind of characters
Fuchsia.
that right.
Oh man.
I love it and the kind of the lies of a simple line and
Yeah.
how, what Rumiko Takahashi does, you can look at it and go, oh, I see she's using relatively simple lines. There is nothing simple about what she does. She's a genius.
Tell me where you sold your soul.
Right? It's just like to have that control. It's the intent. It's the intent behind a line. But what I found when I've been playing on paper recently, with those knees was a perfect example, is I am quite a
We have a
control
special guest
freak.
in a moment.
Oh, really? Ooh. I'm quite a control freak when it comes to artwork. Oh, is this gonna be your cat? Oh,
Yeah, she always cameos every now and then. Come
oh,
over here.
yay!
Yeah.
Come
Carry
here,
on.
come say hi.
Nope.
Yeah, because I work digitally, I have what started off being great about working digitally is the freedom to mess around with things and know you're not going to break anything years ago. But over years, I kind of recognized the fact that what was a freedom thing is now a control thing. Like I'm so used to controlling every element of the page, I can control exactly where things are going to go. What's been amazing working on paper is letting go of that and understanding that, oh yeah, part of the fun of art is actually not really being entirely sure where it's going to go. Sometimes a blot of ink's going to happen and you're going to go, oh, that's great, I can use that. And but then I guess the next stage of when you digivolve past that, it's about knowing how to control those things in the first place to a point, like controlling the uncontrollable nature of art, which I'm nowhere near close to doing. I just like telling stories and making a mess. But yeah, they're just completely different ways of approaching things. But I like that you pull that out, and it's so true that what looks simple is not simple.
I genuinely, I mean, there'll be comic books, and I'll just, you just dwell on an ear. You go, that's the best
Yes.
drawn ear ever.
Yeah, I was insanely proud of those knees.
Yeah, you should be.
So
No,
dumb.
a couple that I always dwell on, like Long Halloween by with Tim Sale's artwork,
Yeah.
which is nuts because I mean the Tim Sale is colorblind as well, so I believe he
Is he
colors
really? I
in.
didn't know
Yes,
that.
he
Huh.
apparently colors in he colors in gray tone.
Oh, how
I think, and he
interesting.
trusts his colorist to apparently.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like you see some of his work, especially like the splash pages and stuff, and then Bill Quist's Ebony.
Oh God, I love her so good.
I didn't realize I was still on. Our comic shop remembers what books were on, and when a title ends and they pick up again, you get them again, which is great because I wasn't sure. So I got
Sometimes.
Supergirl. Yeah, sometimes. I got Supergirl in my bag last pickup, and I was like, yes. And I was just sitting there, just going, it's like the nose and the
eyelashes.
Yes, the eyelashes, and the same with Joelle Jones as well.
No,
Just
Bill Quist is I mean, there's so many people I could rave about who are just
yes.
mind blowing. But you're right, it's the small things. I'll sit and look at someone's work and I'll just fixate on the elbow. Like, how do they do that elbow? Like that's amazing.
One I always I absolutely love. I always go on about them as well. It's Jaime Hernandez, and it's like the way he draws like people's imperfections, and like his women are beautiful.
His stuff's so alive.
Yes,
I
and
think
it's like muffin tops, and it's the
yeah.
it's little like the ways like when he dresses a wrestler up and he puts them in little briefs, or it's the choice to show where a muscle bulges, and you're just like
Yeah, I love, like, I always think with art, and now what I'm going to say to disclaimer this, there is nothing wrong with technically perfect art. Obviously, if someone can do something technically brilliant, then I have absolute respect for that. But whether it's art or singing or I don't know, I'm trying to think of something else. Anything creative. Murder, why not? I'm a real fan of things being raw and emotional. Like if something can convey a feeling to me, I would rather take that over like a perfectly drawn thing. Oh, sorry, that's my email. Oh, oops. Did that come through on the recording?
No.
Sorry.
But now
I
you
thought I turned everything off. Yeah, I'd rather look at something, and Hernandez is a perfect example of stuff that, not that it's not technically great, but it's so alive, and I love work that has life to it. And it's actually the single hardest. You can't learn that. It's so hard. And you always worry about whether it's in your own work. And I think it's why I quite often love my rough lines way more than I will like my inks. Like my rough lines, I often look at and I feel like, yeah, this works. There's life to this. And the moment I try and ink it, I'm like, I've killed it. I've killed it dead. Where's the life gone? So artists who can keep that, just that spark, that's an amazing thing.
There's so many artists, of course, out there that have a sort of some sort of talent to making not making noise work. Obviously, it's their style, but like Sinkovich and I just forgot his name.
I do that all the time.
Carlo.
Carlo was going to say, but also our socks friend.
Justin.
Jim
Mafood.
Jim Mafood. How could I not remember?
Oh, I don't know.
Jim Mafood.
Okay.
Check out Jim Mafood's work. It's
I will. Writing that one down.
It's outrageous. He's it's just the noise, and it's the mixed media as well. It's you see the pencils in the background sometimes, or the splatter of paint. Saying about happy accidents, I mentioned previously in another chat we had with somebody, Brian Froud. He builds like whole universes on coffee stains.
Whoa!
What? Stuff like that. He'll draw goblins. Obviously, he's the creator of the creatures in Labyrinth and Dark Crystal.
Oh, cool.
The designer, and his little boys, Toby, in Labyrinth.
Right. I remember hearing that there was the. I remember there being some link about whose kid that was. Oh, that's brilliant.
And in one of his books, this is just a coffee ring stain. I was just pointing to a piece of paper you can't see, and and he drew a creature out of it.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I don't know about you, but I see pictures everywhere. Like that Scott McCloud thing is so true. We have some tiles in our bathroom that I can spend hours. Like, unfortunately, I literally do a lot of the time looking at these tiles because I just see so many different shapes
in the bath, of course.
Not doing anything else. No. And it's for if artists can like harness that. Rather than just see it, but actually find a way to harness it. That's really cool. I want my characters to be people who readers want to be friends with or like talk to. You want them to reach out of the page in some way.
I know what you mean. I just remembered explaining something we were in the car once, and I was saying about seeing faces in the back of cars. We were traveling everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And Ricky's mum was wondering what the hell I was going on about. I was like, "Oh, that's a happy car."
Yeah, you get
to. Like, what's he going on about? And then she couldn't stop doing it then, which was really funny.
I love that. It's like once you see something, like remember years ago that meme went round of someone now which way round was it that they realised that all ducks are wearing a Batman mask, or I'm mixing my memes, I think. But there was like, was it ducks were stormtroopers, or there was something to do with Batman and a dog? I don't know. There was like a combination and someone put it up.
I like it, whatever it is.
And suddenly everyone was like, oh, I can't unsee that now. That's but cars for sure, happy cars, angry cars.
I can't remember what car it is, but like ever since Adam done that game where he was saying about that, there's this car, I think it's a Citroen that just looks smug, and I hate being behind them now because it's just got this smug car looking at me.
Smug car.
I don't remember what it's called. Facial pareidolia?
I don't remember. But I know exactly what you mean.
Google. There we go. We touched on it a bit a moment ago, but we wanted to ask as well, specifically who have you been influenced by? Not just from comics as well, like what made Emma?
Oh, good lord, that's a big question. So my mom met my dad. In terms of comics, certainly Rumiko Takahashi, as I say, big time. Dylan Dog as a character, but I'd say Fregieri was probably the top. Whenever I saw a Dylan Dog was because they had lots of different rotating artists, but every time a Fregieri issue came out, I was like, because he's incredible. But actually, a lot of people who I'm blessed enough to now be able to call my friends. So people like Amy Reeder and Becky Cloonan, and like I know my friends in Sweatdrop. We were all sort of coming into the industry at a similar-ish time, and. So even people like Paul Duffield and Kate Brown, who were not in Sweatdrop, but I knew them because we both did the Tokyo Pop Rising Stars of Manga. Myself and Sonia from Sweatdrop were in the same book they were, and so we kind of got to know them through that. And there were people whose stuff I would just look at and go, whoa, my God, I admire these people so much. And then because the industry is what it is and it's not massive, as you know, you get to know people. And so, yeah, I feel very lucky to be able to say a lot of the people who influenced me, I can call friends now, which is very, very lovely. Mark Buckingham as well is another one, stuff in Fables. I mean, to be honest, it's incredibly rare for me to not be inspired. I think, if anything, I look at comics and I get inspired by them. It's quite hard to find stuff that you would look at and you don't. There's something you can pull out of everything that makes you go, ooh. But outside of comics, video games, big time, especially the Final Fantasy series, a lot of my, there's dumb things we were talking earlier about being inspired by an ear or an elbow. This will date me as well, I had the Final Fantasy VIII big poster of Squall looking over the gunblade on my door at university. And I remember noticing, because he's, hey, cat. Oh, and a tabby. Mine's a tabby too. Because his face is obviously printed huge on this poster, I noticed that he had like a double line under his eye, and I tried drawing it, and that so you incorporate small things. So I can look at like sometimes certain eyes I draw. I'm like, oh, there's the double line that I stole from that school poster back in the 90s.
I know. I love that though. I do love that when you learn the not the cheat code, but you learn the secret to doing something. Not simply, but the way that appeals to you. Like, I mean, like I always draw the same face when I haven't drawn anything on here, but when I draw faces, I do it to kind of keep myself from basically doing anything else.
Sure,
and,
yeah.
It's the way a nose is drawn, the way maybe men's eyes might be rectangular, and, female eyes might be more almond shaped or something like that. And I think it's just satisfying as well. I think it appeals to some sort of aesthetic in you as well.
Well, there's a magic when you unlock something because you've seen it's like you've tuned into the Matrix and you've looked at a comic page, but unlike everyone else, you focused on that one tiny detail and you've realized what the artist did, and only you have unlocked that. Obviously, no, lots of people have, but it feels special.
We had a whiteboard. We had a whiteboard that we used to write our ideas on and everything, and it lived in Adam's kitchen, and I'd go over there every now and then, and it would be the ideas that we were working on, and then around it just eyes everywhere drawn, just eyes drawn on this board.
Absolutely. Oh, we've all been there. I used to have sketch pads just full of eyes, and my mum would open them and be like, "Why are your books staring at me?"
I genuinely, I mean, parents always are proud of their kids. My daughter has always been into art. Her mum is fantastic. Her mum doesn't do any illustrations now or anything. She's happy where she is, but my daughter's clearly following her mum.
Oh,
and
that's
genuinely,
great.
She just sits next to me. Sometimes I lean over like this and I go, "What are you drawing?" It's some goth star from the 80s or something, some musician, and I'm like, that's amazing. She goes, and I go, "No, honestly, that's amazing." I mean, she goes, "Oh, but it's." I was like, she's on like from somebody from some awkward angle and got it right, and I'm like, that would take me years. That's taken me years to learn that. I mean, casually.
That's excellent.
It's
but as you know, as a creative, not seeing that in her own work is what's going to project her forward, because none of us like what we do. You can't like what you do.
You mean you're telling her I should tell her it's crap?
No, you should keep telling her it's good, but it's fine for her to go, nah, because that nah is what's going to inspire her to want to keep getting better, It's the old classic thing, the pain we suffer as creatives. Is that if we ever look at our work and go, it's perfect, then we're done, pretty much.
I'm terrible for that, though. I mean, I'd draw stuff and I'd get almost to like a panel, and then it would look terrible, and it goes in the bin. I don't keep it. It goes in the bin. I'm the worst. But I found the artist's name as well. It was Yoshitaka Amano.
Oh, Amano, of course, right? Yeah. Oh, wow, yeah.
I mean, the stuff that he does with negative space, he just ink washes, boom, 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 it's all done,
Well, Amano, obviously, he did all the Final Fantasy design work originally.
That's what I mean. It's like he did. I was watching on Netflix the video game documentary, and he got to RPGs, and he just did a quick ink wash something. And it was just
super cool. Super cool.
Yeah, we could go on about video games all day. I was going to ask you, you ever played the Tales of series?
Which Tales of?
All of them.
Like,
Look, Tales of Fantasia, Tales of the Abyss, Tales. I was just
no,
naming
I have not.
them.
Is this a mistake?
Yes,
Oh, okay. Okay.
maybe.
I feel like there's one. There's one I've played. I was waiting for you to say the word I'm thinking of because I'm going to say it wrong.
Suikoden?
Vesperia or something? Tales
Oh
of.
yes, Tales of Vesperia.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I have.
There
It's
we
just
go.
like there's a word I'm looking for.
When you said video games, I remembered. While I've got my table set up here. I'm terrible. I've got just over here. I've got a PS4, a PS3, a Switch, a SNES. Ricky's the same.
Excellent.
I've
Yeah.
got a stack of Game Boy Color, Game Boy Original, Game Boy Advance cartridges. My DS is just in a box. I'm terrible, and I've got a stack of games for the last 10, 15 years that I have not finished, but I'm actually invested in. I think I need to take a picture of this game stack.
I know many people like you, but I mean I've been there, not to that degree. I'm literally going to finish this and then go and log back onto Genshin Impact because I'm quite deep into that at the moment.
I stay away from that one. It's just I don't. It's online, man. It's just gonna take me forever. I'm never gonna finish it.
No, there's no end. There is no end to it. It's amazing.
My Switch is to hand at the moment because all my friends was like, oh, you should try Pokemon Unite because they know I'm a big Pokemon fan. And now it's like, even if I don't play it, I need to log in to get so I could get the login bonus.
You know,
So dangerous.
We were doing that with Mario 35 when it was out. It was an addiction. I'd have to log in just not to. I wouldn't care about the daily stuff. I just had to get at least first place a couple of times, and I would because I'm good.
Thankfully, I'm not very competitive. So
I'm
like
not
games...
either. I don't like playing. I don't like playing with other people. That was what was cool about 35.
No, I hate playing with other people.
I see. There we go.
But that's the beauty of Genshin. Very clever system. They've done it so that instead of all your story stuff is solo, no one can play with you to do that. But if you do want to run around with friends just to explore and do some harvesting, you can do that. So I've realised we've been talking for an hour. I've actually not talked about a single comic I've made. Yeah, I think we've just literally had a random geek out.
This is kind of what we do, but yeah, it's cool. But we were going to go back into it. I mean, we do want to ask you about some of the stuff you've done. I mean, obviously you started with the manga Shakespeare stuff, and was it Hamlet first or Much Ado?
Yeah, Hamlet was first. So that was like I was saying a while back through Sweatdrop, we got to know a few people, and one of those people was Paul Gravett, and basically Emma Vieceli was launching the manga Shakespeare line at that time, and had just said to him, "Do you know any people who could pitch for it?" And yeah, so a bunch of us pitched, and amazingly, I got given Hamlet, and it was a risky way to start a professional career. Like I didn't know what I was doing, and I mean, the notion was genius. I'd done a whole dissertation at university on Shakespeare and education because I'm very much a mix of English and theatre is my background. Comics is like hobby, but theatre is what I trained in, and I was very keen on how we should approach Shakespeare in education, and a comics fan, and yet never considered, we could just do Shakespeare as comics. But Emma Vieceli had put those things together, and so yeah, diving in with Hamlet and Sonia at the same time as doing Romeo and Juliet.
Yep.
And yeah, really, I've said it many times in several interviews, but it really could have gone one of two ways. Either we were going to cast a new light on how to absorb Shakespeare, and we were going to bring manga to a wider audience, whatever people classed manga as being, or we would have been killed with sticks and told that we destroyed culture forever. So it could have gone really badly, but thankfully it got taken really well, and it was an amazing experience for a first book to be going on a book tour to Japan. I mean, I've never experienced anything like that since. I've been doing this professionally for 15 years, and I've still not reached the heady heights of my first book. Like, that's going. And I remember being in a taxi in Japan, and the driver was asking us what we were there for, and we were kind of saying, like, we do comics, and he said, manga, and there was this brilliant moment, again, going back to what the view of manga was back then, where we said manga, and he said, "Oh, manga like Snoopy," and we were like, "Yeah, manga like Snoopy, of course, because it's just comics here, right?" It was amazing. So yeah, that was where it started. Much Ado, I went back a few years later because Much Ado is my favorite Shakespeare play, and I think I'd gone and done a couple of other jobs after Hamlet. By that point, I'd gone freelance. I wasn't freelance when I started Hamlet. But that happened during the process, and then a couple of years later I went back to Emma saying, could I do Much Ado because it's my favorite play. That one lent itself to comics really well.
I've read a little bit of Shakespeare. I being completely novice to it all, but I did without people were asking me, "Are you doing that for school?" I was like, "No, I just wanted to read it." And
For fun.
the one that strangely, I mean, I've read King Lear and I've read a few others, obviously Romeo and Juliet and things like that through college and whatnot. But for some reason, I don't know why it stuck with me more. But I guess because I saw the film beforehand. Was Titus Andronicus.
Oh,
I know it's
really?
not the. I know it's kind of split.
You're so hipster.
I know, but I think it's because I could see Anthony Hopkins and Alan Cummings and things like that.
Right,
It
right.
Just and I could imagine Alan Cumming delivering Saturn's lines and things like that. So
fair, yeah.
but,
I don't know, something about, for me, Much Ado is just such a brilliant blend of comedy and then the gut punch. It does what, a lot of the stories I loved in comics and especially in anime where you had like a goofy character who then had a moment where they got pushed and got serious and something bad happened. So for me, seeing a character like Benedict going from being ho 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 Benedict to then having to potentially duel his best friend for a bit. It just, I love that story. So I had a lot of fun drawing that one.
It's cool that you got to draw something that you're invested in as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's really cool. What did you do after then? What was the next big thing? Was it the Doctor?
So, it's funny that over the years, I remember talking to Tim Perkins at a Malta Comic Con once, and I'd found out that he'd drawn some issues of the real Ghostbusters, and I was a massive fan of the Ghostbusters, primarily Egon. And it was like, oh my God, tell me about when you were working on that series. And I remember him saying, do you know what? I don't really remember it. And me thinking, how could you possibly not remember a comic you've done? So I've only been doing it 15 years, and I'm already at a point where I go, what did I do then? So it's really embarrassing. I'm like, oh, I see what he means now. So I think I lose track of the timings of what happened when, but certainly early on I was working for the DFC. I was doing a writing and drawing a series called Violet, about a young girl with purple hair and roller skates who got superpowers when she turned 13. That was a lot of fun. I did the Vampire Academy series for Penguin, who then became obviously PenguinRandomHouse. So that was like a 3-book thing, working with Michelle Mead and Lee Dragoon, which that was super fun. I did My Little Pony for a while. Myself and Kate Brown were drawing My Little Pony, and our words, we were being paid to fart rainbows. That was that. I think a lot of what I used to and still wanted to pursue with comics is I do honestly believe that comics can be for anyone, about anything, by anyone, and I wanted to I never wanted to fall into one thing. So what was great early on is I did get the opportunity to jump around and try a lot of different things. Obviously I was still doing Dragonair. There were a few, like I did Young Avengers and girl comics for Marvel, Supergirl for DC, and I think all of that stuff came before Doctor Who, but I honestly lose track a little bit, and I can't remember if Doctor Who was after or before Gem either. So it was like there was lots of little things jumping around, and everything I did I got to pull something from and like enjoyed in its own way. Doctor Who, when was the 8th Doctor?
Before the 7th. After the 7th. Damn it, I ruined the joke.
You ruined your own joke. Go back in time and change it.
No, I'm not editing that.
So, which is my scatty way of saying I can't remember what I did straight after that, because I just don't. I think I jumped around through a lot of things, and my brain.
Telling everybody about all the things you've worked on.
Yes, it's a cunning way of throwing in. Here, have a bunch of titles. I don't remember what came after that, but I think the other thing that's interesting is, by the time Avalon Chronicles, that might have been Avalon Chronicles around then. For Oni Press, because there was a point where I'd actually been mostly working in long form like graphic novels, so never being released as single issues. It was all straight to graphic novels. So obviously the manga Shakespeare, Avalon, Vampire Academy, a few years later Alex Rider, and it was all like solid full graphic novels. And that's such a different discipline to working on single issue stuff, which I've actually done a lot more of in the last few years. In fact, I think like that Gem and Doctor Who time started a run of, I don't think I've done a solid graphic novel since then. It's all been sort of monthlies and stuff. They're just a completely different kind of discipline. Now I'm very much at that point where I'm thinking, I really want to dive into a long form story again, I think.
I think I know what you mean. It's the same with us. I mean, because we write predominantly, well, not obviously, but because me and Ricky write, and we find there's different pleasures to be found. I mean, we still enjoy what we do, so we find new ways of enjoying writing. Like we do a little, not that it's been published at all yet, but we're doing little 4-panel strips based on an idea that Ricky's nephew actually initially came up with. We kind of fleshed out about just NPCs.
Nice.
So just be set up, running the gag and then punchline. And it's just something fun about challenging yourself, I guess, as well.
Yeah, different formats, because you have to change how you're working depending on the format entirely. And of course, this is all just talking about drawing comics. It's still, I still feel relatively new in terms of writing. Like, although I've always written for me, writering. I'd always written stuff that I would draw, but it's a world away from what you guys, I'm guessing, do, which is writing for someone else to draw. That's like that felt like being handed the keys to the car, and be like, here you go, you've got an artist now. Like, whoa, really?
What do I do with it? Do I have to feed it?
That's so much responsibility.
I remember we had a conversation with one of our friends. He's a great artist, but he didn't know that there were bottom eyelids.
Oh,
it was a gag it was just a visual gag where somebody's pulling down their eye with a hook, talking about they've got a hook.
Oh, and he thought they were pulling the...
Yeah, and they were like, what's a bottom eyelid? You've only got 2 eyelids. I'm like, no, you don't. So I sent him a Wikipedia link saying that you have eyelids at the top and bottom of your eye.
I don't think I would have realised there's an eyelid at the bottom, but I would know about pulling the bottom of the eye. I love the idea of pulling the top of the eye down. That's fantastic.
And I like it with my own eye.
I do...
No, go on.
Oh, no, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, and it's that weird thing when you're writing, like, it depends who you're writing for as well, because, like, if you're used to writing with the artist you're going to be giving work to, you know how bare bones the script can be because they're not going to listen to what you've said, so you might as well just tell them what you need in the panels, compared to, like, other artists where you've got to write down, right, I need this in this panel, I need that in that panel, and so, like, it becomes weird when you write, and, like, when you tell people that you write comics as well, they go, oh, so they come to you and you write in the speech bubbles, and it's like, no, I tell them what to write before I tell them what to draw and then what to put in the speech bubbles too.
It isn't just we still learn as well, because now we realize that, I guess you feel the same with now you're writing for people as well, that you realize you got to warn people well ahead. You got to spoil things for people, Don't forget that blah 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 is going to lose an arm, so just set that up,
But that's really good. If you're like, we're always learning, to pick up what you said there. Yeah, we're always going to be learning. But I've actually done, without naming names, I've worked sometimes with writers who don't necessarily. So when I write scripts, I mean, it helps that Claudia Leonardi, who draws Life is Strange, she's bloody brilliant. But I like to think when I write a script, because I've spent so many years drawing comics and I've worked with different writers, I've drawn from very different styles of scripts, exactly like you say. Some of them are very prescriptive, some of them are just like a thing happens. So when I was writing a script, I was like, I want to make sure I'm not being overly, I want her to have freedom, but I also don't want to leave her, floating around not knowing what's going on. I had a point, I was going to make a point relating to something you said. Oh no, it's gone.
We were enjoying the journey just like you, so...
Where did the point go? Oh, yes, you're saying about foreshadowing is actually, and often in a world of comics where writers are scrambling to keep up with monthly schedules, often you don't have the luxury of knowing what's coming up. And there's a massive difference between and again, this isn't always on the writer. It's often like depends on what the schedules are they're working to. But I've done projects before where I'm merrily drawing away from a script, and then later it turns out, oh, and then this big thing happens, and I'll be thinking, but I could have set that up if you'd told me before. I could have seeded that, and it might be that the writer doesn't think visually, so maybe didn't think about how that would come across visually, or they just not had a chance because they were like, well, I didn't know I'd be allowed to put that in the story at that point.
Yeah.
And that's a real issue with the way comics are scheduled. The beauty of a standalone book, or what Malin and I are doing with breaks, that we've had the story planned out for so many years, so everything can be seeded and every twist has been planned like years in the planning, and there's a real luxury feeling in massively. There's a real luxury in feeling so in control of what you're making that you can, exactly like you say, put in that foreshadowing, put stuff in that means that when that happens, it's going to have more of an impact. But yeah, I totally understand that within the confines of the way comics are scheduled, we don't always have that luxury. There'll be times as readers we're reading a comic and we think it's weird that they didn't mention that before.
Yeah. It does bug me when I see that as well. Like, oh, that was a good time. In hindsight, you read something, and go, should have done that earlier.
Yeah, but there's often a horribly logical reason that it hasn't. And I've also heard stories. I've had a few of them myself, but I love some of the classic stories you get from artists who've had a script. One of my friends, I won't say who because it's not fair to the writer, but they had a beautiful scene descripted of the silhouette of the back of two people looking at a sunset. They are smiling. Just like, please enlighten me as to how this works in one
you
panel.
obviously just draw a smile like that, just
right in the sky, just like.
It's that weird thing of, because like that was something that came up when we were originally started out, and one of the group had written about like someone. There's a man sitting in the corner whistling. He gets up and closes the window, and that's in one panel. And it's like because you're trying to think of it visually, but obviously you're only seeing static images from something happening. So like, I kind of get it.
Yeah, when you get the hang of it, though, I think it helps to regiment it. I think doing the shorts that we were writing helped because you boil it down. Understand that you need things. As we were doing that, we realized, oh heck, we need to make a glossary. We need to describe what characters look like because they're recurring, and we don't have somebody that's already done a concept for something. And it's kind of cool. I like that. It's just like when you're looking at somebody's art and going, how did they do that? I like looking at from the other side of things and going, how do we do that? How do we make sure people know that that's got to go on?
The science of comics.
Yes. The science of comics.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that, like, for those of us that, if you've been reading comics your whole life, or you've been creating for a while, we're used to what the idea of a comic beat is or what action points are. But, I mean, things like Doctor Who, to go back to what you were saying before, that was crazy to think back on it, but that was George Mann's first time scripting a comic, and so as a result, and he was so great to work with. I loved work. One day we'd love to go back to the Eighth Doctor, but he'll say himself that it was quite an experience for him because he was an amazing writer, but he hadn't written to comic format at that point. And there's so many subtle things about comics writing that we take for granted, I think, when we're used to being immersed in it. And action points is definitely one of them. It's an incredibly common slip up for a lot of new comics writers, to have in one panel the car jumps across a bridge, lands and skids, like this doesn't work.
No, I know what you mean. I was going to ask you that you said about breaks as well. That was something that you've been doing for a long time. How did that come about?
So there's a fun backstory to Breaks, almost as fun as the story of Breaks. So Breaks itself now in comic form has been running online for over 8 years. We're expecting it to it's all planned. It's a 3-arc story. We're halfway through the 3rd arc now, but we're releasing it a page a week for free. So do check it out on Tapas. So because of that kind of controls the speed it's being released at. But so it's 8 years being released as a comic, but a good couple of years before that as well, because Malin and I first wrote it in prose, or like a rough version of it in prose, before we decided we wanted to tell it as a comic. And the reason we wanted to tell it as a comic is because of the nature of the story. And again, things have moved on in a really positive way. But at the point when I was saying to her, I think I'd quite like to do this as a comic, there just weren't enough LGBT, YA stories being told in comic form. Like, you could get them in prose, but not so much in comics, and certainly not free to access to the exact audience you want to be reading them. So that was why we did it in comic form. But the origin story to it gets really bizarre because it came about because of Dragon Age, going back to the games. So I am a massive fan of BioWare, and I love Dragon Age, and specifically in this case Dragon Age 2, and my Hawk was called Cortland Hawk, and Malin, who I did not know at the time, had a Hawk called Ian Hawk. And basically, we, after the game finished, a bunch of us, we didn't know each other. We were just a bunch of people who were quite creative and obsessed with Dragon Age. And I had never done so it started on LiveJournal, like it was just no, was it LiveJournal or Tumblr? I can't remember. One of the two, just fans of Dragon Age, fan posting. Before it all got toxic and horrible. And then someone suggested, why don't we do like a group writing project? But at that point, I think we'd been doing silly, like, I can't remember what the word is. Sounds terrible of me, because we would do it. You get like a prompt and you do there's a particular word I can't think of.
We call, me and Ricky do something similar sometimes. The lockdowns kind of sapped our creativity, really.
I understand that, yeah.
Just taken over. But I call it Words from Friends, where we give words to each other.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, prompt. Yeah. Well, it was, that kind of thing. So you prompt it, but that was being done as our incredibly, bear in mind, I wrote a 12... Oh, in fact, I missed a bit of the story out. I'm a really bad storyteller. So amongst our fandoms, a bunch of us were doing fan fiction, and I wrote a 12-chapter, yes, I did, a 12-chapter book called Sign of the Maker, which sort of played with the subtext of Dragon Age 2. So it was more focusing on Sebastian's story and then, like, playing into other things. And there was one I was reading, an amazing fanfic I was reading, which I didn't know was Malin who was writing it at the time, but we were both working under pseudonyms. Because it's fandom. And then a bunch of these people who were working under pseudonyms were like, hey, wouldn't it be fun if we stepped away from Dragon Age? We obviously all just enjoy writing. And at this point, I think I just finished Vampire Academy, so I was waiting on something to start. I forget what it was. It might have been Alex Rider. And there was a bit of a gap. And so someone said, why don't we do this like collaborative writing project? So nothing to do with Dragon Age, but we'll do a setting. In this case, let's take a school and we'll just throw characters in, and you can like write a chapter or write a paragraph, however much you want, and then someone picks it up and writes a bit more. And I was a bit like, ooh, I don't know. I like to control my stories. I'm not sure. But I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. And I kind of was on the sidelines a bit. And then a mutual friend had pulled in Malin, again, by a different name. So I didn't know who she was. And the pair of us joined this thing. And there was a bunch of us. It was all just a really fun group of people who were very creative, telling stories. And as we were doing that, and I had brought Cortland, but he wasn't Hawk anymore. He was Cortland Hunt by that point. So I was like, I'm just going to, play with this. And then gradually, it was a good bunch of, it was like 6 or 7 main characters in there. But something happened with Cortland and Ian's story. And I basically was, because I'm me, and I'm not very good at just off-the-cuff collaborative writing, I was basically using a story I'd been planning anyway, like a teen story, and I was like, I'll use that character in here. But I hadn't realised that there was this gap in the story. I hadn't realised it until Malin was there writing the other part of that story, and after a good year of this, the pair of us finally, because we never communicated in any way outside of story. There was no planning, it was always just story. And then eventually, after about a year, we messaged each other and had this unmasking moment when I was like, okay, well, look, hands on the table, I actually make comics. And Malin was like, I'm actually a queer horror writer in Sweden. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And that was when we were like, well, why don't we take this story and do it properly? And so started it in prose and then eventually into comics, and that's when it became what it is. So it's really weird because it started as this completely organic story. So in the original collaborative writing thing, when you realize that Ian was falling for Cortland, it was genuine, it was real, it was like, I did not see that coming. This is so as writers we got to experience this. It was such a different way of writing a story, and I I'd never collaborated with anyone on writing before. Yeah, it was amazing. And it's become something we're really proud of, and it's quite special. But it's just such a funny origin story.
It's a very unique one as well, and it's coming to an end now. I guess that if you're doing 3.
It's
And
it's again because it's only a page a week. It's going to be, I don't know. It's hard to
10
tell.
years.
Yeah, about 10 years, I reckon, all in. 3
Back out.
books, 2 books already out. When the third is done, I'll do another Kickstarter for that one. We do have the printed collections are published through Soaring Penguin as well, which is great. But it lives on the internet as well. Yeah, it's going to be weird getting to the end of that because it's been with me a long time.
I think I don't know. There are probably ideas that I've got that that live with me. I think they're part of me. That's probably I won't put them down anymore because if I do, it'll be like chopping off a hand or something. But saying about writing, me and Ricky obviously write. When we first started in the collective, the idea was not to have a shared universe, it's to have just an anthology book, and then we boiled it down with our creators. We boiled it down into a city, basically a fictional version of Swansea.
Oh,
And
cool.
that's when me and Ricky started writing together, and we didn't realize I always say this thing that we argue in the same direction. We never it's like a sounding board that you automatically have, so you want to think something out, and it could be something as stupid as a visual gag, but there's nothing better than, it's almost like, I forget what they call it now. In movies, you can film something quickly and then go back to it and check it instead of having to do the dailies like they used to in the rushes, where they have to wait until the next day to see if the shooting was right. You can now watch it back, and it's kind of like that, but in comic form. Like you write something down and hear someone saying it, goes, no, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
We just scrapped whole dialogue, a whole scene.
Yeah. Oh, you guys are so lucky to have that to bounce off of each other. I miss that massively.
People think
Malin
we're
and
married because we do that now.
Yeah.
That's where a collective comes into its own, or work. I mean, there's a lot of writing partnerships like that. With Malin, we actually don't really talk because she's in Sweden, and so we're still. It's an odd thing. We know each other very well through our characters, but
We met.
yeah, we've met 3 times now.
No more.
No more. 3 times. No more. Hopefully we'll meet again. But it is weird when you think we've been working on this story for so long, but it's not like we don't socialize, we don't chat, not even online. We will kind of every now and then we'll do a video chat or something, maybe every few months. So it's a fascinating way to work. But I do miss, certainly with Sweat Drop Days, we used to have that bounce, like you guys are talking about, having someone to bounce things off of. My lovely patient husband gets a lot of it, but also what I found quite difficult this last couple of years, he's working from home as well, like so many people are now, and when I'm writing, particularly Life is Strange, I think because of my theatre background, when I write, like you're saying, I kind of need to act it out. I can't just write it on the page. I need to act it. And it's only having him at home is making me realize how much I used to rely on the fact that I was at home on my own and could be like a crazy person and act out my scripts. And I can't do that now.
He wouldn't have married you if he didn't accept that in you. I mean, you probably
he wouldn't judge. It's me. I judge myself, So I'll kind of be writing Life is Strange scripts and then like whispering them to myself. So at least then I get to hear them so I don't get to have that bounce off with someone else, but for me, it's important to feel how a script rolls off my tongue, like I need to hear that the line feels natural. And so I do that with breaks and with Life is Strange. It all has to be able to be acted out and feel like a natural conversation, I think.
I always explain there was a story, there's a point I don't think it does. Does this script the dialogue? It doesn't, does it? I'm answering my own question. The mayor and Barry's conversation doesn't exist yet, does it? It's only something we've written.
It's something written, never produced.
Our mayor for fictional version of Swansea called Copperopolis was supposed to be speaking to a lackey that he's never met before, and Ricky came up with something really funny, and it was, but we were like, the mayor was going, "Who are you? Where's blah 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 blah," and that was really funny. That clicked straight away, but we couldn't get the voice for the guy. We couldn't get his dialogue right because we couldn't hear what he sounded like, and we had all this stuff explaining. It was just exposition, and it just felt very
stilted, and
we just scrapped it and went, what would he start with? And it was hello, and I was like, I know what he sounds like. I know who he is. I know what words he'd say, because I just went hello, and it was Richard Ayoade.
Oh,
I was
I'm
like,
so obsessed with him at the moment. That's the
was my
best name you
daughter.
could have picked. I've just finished binging Travel Man and Gadget Man.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
love it.
and then dialogue came easy after that. Once you
Yeah.
know what the character sounds like.
Yeah, you know who they are. It's very akin to working in like. And this is why theatre's so important. It's why they should teach drama. It's not about being an actor, but being able to understand the voice of a person. And
Mhm.
so what you're talking about is, yeah, capturing that moment when you click on who that person is. I used to do a lot of workshops. I don't do as many now, but one of the ones I used to run was on storytelling and on character development. So exactly like that kind of thing. And I had a game called the Peanut Game, and the idea of it was is you put all you imagine all the characters, like so everyone in the workshop, all the characters are in a room, and it's lots of chairs around the outside of the room, and in the center of the room is a bowl of peanuts. And the exercise is literally just, what does your character do? How are they going to react to the bowl of peanuts? Are they the sort of character who's going to like sit back and let other people eat peanuts? Are they going to like worry if everyone's washed their hands before they touch the peanuts? Are they going to swoop in and steal all the peanuts? Like, and then you extrapolate out and go, now the bowl of peanuts is a dragon. And like,
Steal the dragon.
yeah. So depending on how your character reacted to the peanuts, it's going to give you a clue as to how they might in turn react to the dragon. And it's exactly what you're saying there. Is like trying to write a character when you don't know who they are is so difficult. But when you have that moment of realizing it's Richard Ayoade, suddenly you're like, oh, I get their mannerisms now. Yeah, so much fun. I think it's one of the kind of blessings and curses of writing licensed stuff like with Life
Yeah.
is Strange. It was terrifying diving in because I love those games and they've got such a strong voice to them. And so there's no anyone who's played their games knows who Chloe Price is, knows
Yeah.
who Max is. So trying to write them and capture them and make them feel believable and like themselves to the readers and to me, to be fair, because I was a fan of the games. I was so concerned but excited about it. I was like, I get to write some of my favorite characters, but also I have to write some of my favorite characters. And then combining them with characters like the High Seas who are brand new and didn't exist before, but trying to make them all feel just as real as each other and settled in the world, like not putting too much weight on the ones that you know. And it's amazing the different approaches, adjusting how you're writing to match those characters.
But I think that's why somebody like you writing Life is Strange is better than just hiring somebody who's known to churn out popular books. Is the right way to go, because you think about those things. You're dwelling on those things. Somebody else who might just be hired to write the script. I guess they wouldn't do that with something like Life is Strange. I think it would just tell too all. The tell would be
No, it's
too obvious.
interesting, isn't it? I mean, yeah, you like to think that. Well, no, I was going to say,
Cool.
I'd imagine anyone who picks up a licensed thing has to care about what they're writing. But no, you're right. That's not true. There's definitely lots of, work for hire where you just get given a property. Life is Strange, actually, funny enough, came about because Andrew James was my editor at Titan when I was doing Doctor Who, and also he'd been following Breaks. And then he'd been fighting for a while to get the license for Life is Strange, and it was him, thankfully, who because I wasn't. It was a real risk to have me writing something I'd not written for someone else before, and but thankfully because of him reading Breaks, he kind of got a sense I could write, and he knew I was a fan of Life is Strange. He was like, "Well, do you like Life is Strange?" I was like, "I freaking love Life is Strange," and originally he was like, "Would you want to draw it?" And I couldn't because I was busy on something else. I was like, "Oh my, this is such an opportunity, and I don't have time, and this is just heartbreaking." And then he was just like, "Well, what about if you try writing it?" I was like, "Are you serious? This is incredible." So I think you're right in that. Luckily, I got that job because I was already a massive fan of the license. Same with Claudia and Andrew himself, who was editing it for the first year or so. Like, he's a massive fan. And I think you're right. You can tell when people have been given a license and they really care about that license.
Can you do some concept or fan art as well, you and Claudia?
Yeah. So, well, Claudia has done fan art before for the license anyway. I did so when the first episode of the first game was out, I did this in hindsight, not great, just a sketch of Chloe because like a load of people playing that game, I was kind of obsessed with her. Like, oh, this character's amazing. And this was quite a long time ago, and it just happened that it got picked up by Square, and then I got approached by Scott Blows at the time at Square. And I went into the office and I ended up doing a series for them of artwork, and it was called Friends for Life, and it was basically a bunch of illustrations that Square commissioned to accompany as the episodes of the game were coming out. So I was kind of, it's funny because when the comic came around, no one had thought twice about that. That was a complete coincidence. And so when I went into the offices and Scott was there the first time we went in, and obviously I was being introduced as the person who was going to be writing the comic, he was like, "Wait, I know you," and I was like, "It's me."
Me all along.
I'm back. So yeah, it was really funny actually that yeah, clearly there was something about me in that franchise.
So,
I think it's pretty cool though.
so the question we had from Nathan does relate to Life is Strange, and he wants to know, did you have a choice of what ending to base the series off of, and if yes, tell her you picked good. But
Oh, I'm glad I picked it. No, I mean, I wasn't given the choice, but I don't think there wouldn't have been any question anyway. I think if they'd said which ending do you want to make a comic from, when people think of Life is Strange, the first game, you think of Max and Chloe, and ultimately in the other ending, there's only Max. You know, that wasn't. Not that you couldn't tell stories. I mean, there are stories you could pull out of the survivors of the storm and or the non-storm and you know, the people in Blackwell.
I don't think they call them survivors then if it's just nothing.
Well, no, they're not. They're just people,
People.
who are there. There was no storm. Yeah, there are stories you could tell, absolutely. But I think for especially what I was being hired to do originally, which was a 4-piece, like, it was just a 4-issue kind of coda to the game series. I wasn't given the choice, but it's the same choice I would have made because it made so much more sense. It was to finish their story, and also as players of the game, the other ending felt a bit more complete in the game. There was nothing left, whereas the Save Chloe ending was a bit like, and and what? So it made perfect sense to put to kind of put an ending in comics on it. As it turned out, obviously it wasn't as much of an ending as we thought, and it was an incredible thing to. There was like in pros and cons that I'd planned out a four chapter end for their story. I knew exactly what my plan was. And then by halfway through issue 4 was when the word started to get round that actually we think this is going to become ongoing. And I'd never experienced something like this. I'm sure a lot of writers who are used to working on licensed things, maybe this is quite normal. But for me, I was like, well, what do you mean? But there was a plan, and they were like, yeah, but now it's got to carry on. So we have to change what you were doing. And it was kind of at the same time amazing that the series was going to continue on, and also awful because I was like, but I've set this stuff up. Going back to what we were saying before about foreshadowing and planning, and like suddenly everything had to change. And what's nice is that now we're far enough ahead into the future. We're in a good place, so I can talk about all this stuff with a smile and be like, I wouldn't change anything. I got to do so much with the story. At that time, though, past Emma did not know that it was going to go okay, and instead she spent like 4 days under a duvet being like, oh no, this isn't how I wanted it to end. And what's amazing is what ended up spinning off as being the Waves storyline and strings and everything else all came out of what had in the original pitch been a 1-page epilogue, which is so we were supposed to have you had your kind of 4 issues and it ended, and then there was a 1-page being like, hey, there are other possibilities out there and somewhere this could have happened, and Square were like, oh, that thing in the epilogue, I think that should be, can we go there? And so there was a real adjustment to make, which, as I say, at the time was pretty tough because I was new to this, and it felt like such a change to what I'd planned. But now, in hindsight, having the extra road we had, literally, because it was a road trip, to play with the story and to bring it round has been, it's been amazing.
That is cool. I mean, and you're not working. It's not like as much as I dig the Star Wars universe, the extended universe, they were still. I mean, up until recently, stuck mostly with for the present stories around the Skywalker clan, and they very rarely branched off in the big push with stories. It was always them. The other stories that stuck around them, were very rarely marketed. And I basically I like that. Life is Strange now is carrying on that way, and you were kind of forefront, and it's just all
It's
fresh new.
it's actually
dirty
been amazing
territory.
when you step back and look at it, because we've been doing it for a few years now, and understandably at the beginning I was very new and quite untested in that kind of thing, so I totally get why Titan and Square, I mean Square, obviously it's their license, it's their baby, so they have the final say on a lot of stuff.
Mm.
And I get it, like I was new and they couldn't let me go crazy. And I think early on things were coming up where I'd be like, oh god, I don't know. As it went on, I'm trying not to say things specifically because I don't want to spoil stuff either, but it's amazing how there were things that I was putting out there early on that actually there was a lot of resistance to at the time, because they were maybe unsure themselves, because a lot changes in a license. Like
Mm-hmm.
when we started making the comic, Life is Strange 2 wasn't out, never mind True Colors being around the corner. So our comic has been there throughout. So things that maybe seemed a bit risky early on, or it's pretty safe to say now, there was someone in a meeting at the end of when we knew Dust was going to have to not, where it wasn't, the story wasn't finishing there.
Mm.
One of the things coming from a voice on Square's side was kill Chloe. Like that was literally saying, well, we could do that, and it's like, well, no, God, no. And there were a lot of discussions about, no, maybe that wouldn't work. We could try this. Also, there was a lot of, and again, completely understandable in hindsight. At the time, things hadn't progressed where they had, and so there was resistance because we didn't want to confirm either way. There were things that like, oh well, both things are real, and we can't really confirm one thing over the other, so it's all got to stay fairly vague, which I understand in hindsight. But what's amazing now, a couple of years later, is what they've let me get away with, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Like I guess because they can trust me a little bit more now, which is nice, and hopefully I've earned that trust a bit. So I mean, really, especially this second season, or what I still think of as the second season, they let me basically pitch the entire 12 issues out. Whereas with the first season, it was sort of like every issue would be, every arc would, as it was going on, they'd be like, oh, well, actually something's changed, so this needs to be worked in, or this can't happen there. So it was all very like, kind of trying to have a long story, but a bit bitty because we didn't know if it was carrying on. Whereas with the second season, it was like, right, well, here's my overarching plan for 12 issues, and they signed off on that, and so it's a world of difference. Partly again because things have progressed on their side, but also because I think I was a little more trustworthy by that point. But it's amazing how these things evolve, and actually the takeaway from it is how grateful I am that I've been allowed to play as I have with that universe. As you say, with some licenses, I mean, Star Wars, there's a lot of fun stuff happens, but up until quite recently, it was very much kept in a separate branch. Like there are characters that my husband's deep into that world, so there's kind of alternate universe stuff, or some of the books, characters he never thought were going to turn up in canon, and so now to see people turning up is really cool. But
yeah.
no, I've been allowed to play, and I'm very grateful for that.
I just imagine that first time you were doing Life is Strange, they were unsure, so they were kind of keeping an eye on you. And then when the second season came around, I just imagine you gave them their pitch, and they looked at it and went, "Yeah, that's straight. That's what we were thinking as well, actually. Yeah. Just snapping everything on it. Yeah, sure, cool."
Well, I think that's the dream for me and Claudia, is seeing any of it bounce back. Which again, can't say much without spoilers or anything else, but I think very much the comic incorporates the game world, and that completely makes sense. But I think what's nice is now the comic and the characters within it have very much progressed beyond the game world. We purposely wanted to have this sort of branch off, and as you know, if you read the comics, I didn't want to shut any doors, so I was able to mess around with lots of alternate possibilities. But at the same time, we have like our comic, we talked earlier on about the comic verse of Life is Strange, where you kind of wanted to have something you could play with that wasn't going to affect or damage anything from the games, which freed us up so much. I think if we were having to keep tight to the game verse, you'd get yourself tied in knots. But the dream would be for any of it to bounce back the other way, I think. And I think especially now that Andrew James, so he spent the first year as the editor for the comics, and now he's a brand manager for Life is Strange at Square. So you've got someone working at Square who very much came from the comic side. So it's feeling much more of a fusion of stuff now. It's not anything I would ever expect, but it would be super cool to like see a nod to something in the comics verse. It still makes my little heart flutter if I see someone talking about Life is Strange fandom and mentioning Tristan or the High Seas, because I'm like, that's amazing. Because if you like Chloe from the comics, that's fair. It's Chloe. But if you like Rachel from the comics, that's interesting because she's a very different character in the comics. And if you like Tristan or the High Seas, then oh my goodness, that's incredible because they're brand new. So, yeah, that will always be a special thing.
Your baby's growing.
Yeah.
It'd be cool. I mean, and it's still relatively new IP as well. So I mean, there's always, before we know it, we'll be watching it on Netflix.
It's a really exciting world, and I think from the beginning, the big rule from Square was always like, just don't explain anything. Nothing's explained. That's part of what gives them these open doors to play with. It'll be, yeah, I can't wait for True Colors. It's gonna be exciting to see where things go in the franchise.
Wink, wink.
No, there's not. Honestly, I know nothing. I know by design, I know nothing. So I'm genuinely just excited.
So I'm aware that we have kept you for about 2 hours now.
Yes, I'm realizing that I've kept you for 2 hours.
No,
as well.
no, we finished our jobs earlier on. We're all just just doing the thing we
I
want to do.
confess, my voice is, you can hear it's getting a bit on the raspy side now. It still struggles a bit after whatever happened last year. So when I talk with it for a while, it's
You
it's
say
fragile.
that I speak to customers all the time. I speak to people all the time, and I just monotone. I think that's why I'm good at my job, because people just want to get me off the phone. But I once woke up years ago. I couldn't speak. No pain.
Oh, really?
So yeah, just I couldn't speak. I just could not make any sounds at all. It was just like whispering, and my daughter thought it was hilarious.
Oh.
And it didn't hurt or anything like that. So I couldn't be like, oh no, and I just couldn't speak at all. And she thought it was fantastic. She was like, look at him.
How long did it last?
A whole day. Like, I went to bed the
Oh.
next morning, woke up, and it started coming back, and by the afternoon I could speak again.
That's laryngitis for you. But whatever happened to mine, it was that, which I've had before as a temporary thing after conventions, especially.
Oh yes, confluence.
There's a Ben Templesmith once made me a sign at a convention that was like, oh, no, I can't say it because it's rude, but basically it was, I had to explain to people why I couldn't talk to them. But I would lose my voice all the time at conventions. It was a bit of a running joke at cons. But yeah, less funny when I lost it at the beginning of lockdown, and it just didn't come back, and it was 4 months all in with no speaking. I couldn't make a sound.
If I couldn't speak for 4 months, I think people would be very happy. I just go around with really like type horn or something, just pissing people off all the time.
Oh, but
no, it's literally depressing.
yeah, I can imagine.
We were genuinely, when you said, no, we were just saying when you said the other day that you lost it, we were like, oh, because I know maybe you're not as active at the moment in theatre and stuff like that, but as you said, it's just as important to you. So you're like, oh heck,
Oh gosh, yeah, I can't imagine. Well, that's a whole nother conversation. That's very down on all the exciting comic stuff we've talked about. But yeah, it was
Next time with Emma, we're going to be talking about bad stuff.
pens and voices. Yeah, I'm incredibly relieved it's back, but it's very fragile, so I have to treat it like a leg with an injury, I guess. Just sort of being gentle with it.
So we do normally have a couple of fun questions to end on. They're pretty short. I think you might have answered one of these already.
Oh.
Earlier on.
Yeah.
The first one is, well, one just you can expand on it as much as you want. What IP or IPs would you like to work on? I mean, I'm not just talking about comic books, but obviously games as well. Or movies or music.
Or theatre.
Gosh, do you know, I was offered. I will always be heartbroken it didn't go through. I won't say who the publisher was. It was quite a big publisher, more a book publisher than a comics publisher. And I was offered the job to do the graphic novel of Hamilton, but literally Hamilton, the stage production. So it would have been, this was before it had opened in London, so it would have been flying out to New York and watching the show and making sketches, and oh, that would have been amazing. But when I was younger, early on in comics, I think I think we all kind of, you can't not think about the things you want to draw. Like I love Gambit and I love the Young Avengers. I wanted to do something with either of those. Myself and Robin Firth once were concepting. we never pitched it. We were concepting a new team for Marvel called the Extractors, and it was going to be like a basically a heist team, including obviously Gambit. So there were like things, yeah, characters I wanted to play with. As I've got a little bit older, I'm kind of reaching a point now with my career where if something came along, that I've been really lucky that a lot of the licenses I have worked on, Gem, Back to the Future, Doctor Who, specifically the Eighth Doctor, like these are all things that if you'd asked me when I was younger what I would like to work on, those are the things I would have liked to work on. Drawing Back to the Future, hell yeah. Now I think I'm finding myself in a place where I'm back to being like, well, that was fun, that was great, but I really want to tell my own stories again. And I think often we talk about the comics industry as being a little bit backwards. And I'm sure you guys have had this conversation where it feels a bit like as a professional, you have to cut your teeth on doing your own stories so that you can earn the right to do other people's stories. And that's where the money is. And it's kind of like, surely that's backwards. Surely you should cut your teeth working on established characters that already have a following and, you've got worlds to play in, you've got training wheels on. And then you get to go off and do your own thing. I suppose we're seeing it a little bit more now because we're seeing an age where, geniuses like, Kieran and Matt Fraction, they're then stepping away and doing their titles through Image and stuff. So we are seeing that they've kind of gone from indie through the chain of doing established characters and then doing their own things. So, but I think, yeah, I haven't had that big solid. I haven't done like a 2-year run on a Marvel title or anything yet, but I don't know whether I'm the sort of creator who will. So I think there's characters I would still like to draw, and I've been lucky doing little shorts for things like Supergirl or Wonder Woman. Like, it's lovely to dip my toe in and get to feel like I've connected with those characters. But yeah, I'm now at a point where I'm just like, my heart says it wants to tell my own stories. Whether I've earned the right to do that yet, I don't know. But that's, yeah. So IPs, it's tricky.
I'm sure you have earned that right. You said were you in Sensation Comics?
Yes. Yeah.
I probably read without even paying attention because I've got Wonder Woman on my pull. And
right. I mean, it was a long time ago, and I do tend to. I'm a bit of a ninja creator. I'll pop in and do like 10 pages on something, and then I'm gone.
What's really cool is when you see a compilation book like that, and you flick through it and you don't pay attention. I always pay attention to who's on the books now, like Batman Black and White, saying about Dylan Twist earlier. I was looking forward to knowing she was in the book, and it's weird when you thumb through a book and you go, I know that art style, and you go and it's in black and white especially or something, you're like, and you go to the beginning, you go, there we go, yeah, I thought so.
That's a nice thing when that happens. Well, it's lovely as well when you look back at stuff like the Young Avengers after party that Jamie and Kieran pulled together, and I mean there were people there obviously already established at the time, like obviously Becky and Ming Doyle and stuff. But I think that was one of Christian Ward's first comics. It was a really, when you look back at it now, you look at that collection of artists and go, what a cool bunch of people to be doing a book together. And it was so lovely being part of that. But I love that with comics, that people kind of come together and work on something and then scatter and go off and do things afterwards. And as you say, we can then be flicking through a collection years later and are like, oh my God, that was you. How did I not realize that?
No, that's what you can hope for, and that's what's nice about comics, I think.
Yeah, well, fun connections. Going back to Breaks a little bit, the first book of Breaks, the cover was coloured by Christina Strain, who's like a friend of mine, but I started off as a massive fan of her colours in Runaways. So like, there's so many random little connections in comics, and I love joining the dots together and being like, oh, you worked with that person on that, that's cool.
Yeah, like I've got Pride right there, and when we've spoken to Joe a few times,
the Love Is Love. Oh my God, I that was Christina Strain and that was Nunzio and Christina Weir writing and Christina Strain colouring, and so Nunzio and Christina were who I worked with on Avalon, the Oni book. So again, funny little connections. Yeah, it was only one page, but still probably a page one of my proudest pages, actually. I love that.
That's really cool. It's just the way that you get to connect with people, and you speak to people and find out that other people have done this, stuff for them. It's just that I think it's the trust or the willingness as well, especially when it's something like something new. I mean, we're two white straight hetero guys. That's this guy. But
You
we
have it
love
hard,
yeah oh yeah so hard but we love being the, I guess I'm speaking for the both of us here, we like being the gray cloud in the rainbow. The cloud needs to be there as well, the plain gray cloud. But it's just nice seeing community again. It just goes back to community as well.
Yeah.
Just seeing it grow and seeing that like with breaks as well, you said maybe back a little while back, maybe it wouldn't have been, it should have been accepted. It probably might have been accepted, but it felt like it might not have been.
Well, I mean, it wasn't, not in a heavy way, but my agent was kind of vaguely pitching it around at the time. We weren't sure what we wanted to do with it, but there were a lot of people who were like, it's great, but we're not ready for that. Like, we're not, I think it was a bit, it seems crazy to say now, but it was a bit of a risk for publishers, which is mad, in hindsight, obviously, but no, community comes together and changes things. And we have our moments in comics, we won't go down that route. We certainly have our moments where things don't go so great and community is tested. But on the whole, I like to believe in the strength of our community. Yeah.
and only being, I think, with positive steps forwards, like positive steps forward like that, we can only really grow and get better, I think.
Yeah, we're always getting better.
The crappy bits just kind of fall to the wayside, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Which kind of neatly goes to the next question, which is a lot more lighter, and you can kind of gush about it. You've already said once, we know, but who are your comic book crushes? I'm guessing. Let me get Gambit.
Oh my god! How did you know? It's like you read
Giant
my
heads.
mind. It's crazy. I mean, a lot of them are going to be really obvious. Gambit, Nightwing. But Dylan. I think it's harder for me to say who's not my comic crush, because I think I have a terrible tendency to, whenever I read a comic, I'm gonna crush on someone.
Emma keeping her pants Vieceli.
It's how I can't. I've always been like that. It's not in a thigh rubbing way. Just there'll be characters that I just connect to, and I used to be like that, going to see plays. There would always be someone. I remember going to see Les Mis for the first time as a 13-year-old and falling deeply in love with Enjolras. I don't know, maybe it's my Nancy Drew upbringing or something, but it's fun to watch things and have crushes on them, and so much of comics is drawn so pretty, especially if Clay Mann draws them.
What Adam's not saying is just out of shot on his screen is a lot of drawings of Power Girl and She-Hulk.
There you go, you see? You like him green and strong.
Yeah, no, there was no. They're actually banned. I'm using a laptop with it's got a rotating heavy metal band logo. So every now and then my screen pop up really brightly because it's just a big white background. No, we have Ricky has a really cool sketchbook that he likes to take to conventions for people to draw, and it's Spider-Man villains.
Nice.
Mine is jokingly called Death by Snoo Snoo. It's like it's just super powered women, women that would crush my pelvis easily.
By Snoo Snoo.
I don't know. I think it's for me. I think it's the easy way out when you find somebody like Adam Hughes, or Jaime Hernandez. So not just women as well, or I can't remember his name. Capullo, the way somebody draws men or women, and it just fits your aesthetic so well.
I'm very lucky. I found a husband who I obviously adore, because for a long time I thought I was going to have to marry a two-dimensional person because
Sorry, honey.
I just they're video game characters, comic characters, 2D characters. Like, woohoo! I love 2D characters.
I was trying to convince my friend into playing the new version of the legacy version of Mass Effect. She's like, I know, I will. I said, I was trying to explain why it's such a good series, why it's such a good game series. Obviously, the whole romance thing is for people or not. And I said, oh, it's made by BioWare. And she was like, okay, I get it.
I get it now. I get
it.
But I've been surprised that Adam's been a bit restrained every time you've mentioned Gambit, that he hasn't gone, oh, Ricky's got a crush on Gambit too.
I mean, it's not hard to have a crush on Gambit.
Oh, Gambit is I mean, you can have him written the wrong way, I think, but when you really appreciate when he's written the right way. I think it just clicks.
I've had this in so many discussions with people where I'm like, there is so much potential in him as a character. Like it's he's been written badly many times, but
sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying, we the true fans see through those, and we see.
Yeah. I like cute moments in comic. I will go. No, saying about like draw. It's writing as well. I will go through bits. Comics, and I'll just stop and I'll go, oh my god. There's a bit that I absolutely love in Days I can't remember what it's called now. Where the X-Men from the future.
Days of Future Past.
No, it was a recent one. It was not recent now. It was a couple of years back.
The Bendis one.
Where the X-Men of the future came to to our present, and it was people like Molly from the Runaways.
Yeah.
Days of, I think it was X-Men of Future Past or something like that.
Mm-mm.
And Jubilee had baby Shogo, and the X-Kids had been messing around with trying to make him safe, and so they created basically a hamster ball for him. And it was just adorable, but there was a bit where Jubilee gets punched through a wall, and they'd given Shogo this little thing they used to press, and they call it the beep beep, and it was just so cute, And there's a bit where she goes, and it's the way they draw her fingers going like this. She goes, press the beep beep, and he's just holding this thing, and he just hits the button. I was just like, oh my god.
I love that stood out to you. Yeah, that's lovely.
There was a bit as well where Psylocke takes somebody out with a psychic mace, and she's holding Shogo in one hand. And she goes, I just took somebody out with this mace one-handed while holding a baby. Motherhood is easy, or something like that. And I just thought the way she was standing was just perfect.
Oh yeah, so crushes many. Yeah, many is the answer.
Again, you have to come back. We'll just have a discussion about the crushes.
Yeah, I don't want to dismiss my entire reading of any pop culture as just being me fancying people, but it's there's something about characters on a page. Yeah.
They were kind of perfect in a way. No, I get, but that's why we connect to the characters. It's weirder when you find a character you hate but you love as well. In prose, it's probably easier because you get to live with a character more. You might see their mind more in prose. But no, I know what you mean. It's they're larger than life as well, aren't they? They're meant to be adored, I think.
Yeah, a lot of them are made to be. We're being manipulated. Hell, we make comics. I know how to manipulate people.
Take my money.
Breaks might do that a bit.
We have gone for almost 2 hours, I think.
Yeah, I think I need to go and get a medicinal brandy for my
restraining order. I thought you were going to say
that. Just before we go, where can people find you?
You can find me on my very old, out-of-date website, emmavieceli.com, but you're probably better off just finding me on Twitter, so Emma Vieceli. It would be remiss of me, I realise I haven't said it, not to say that issue 4 of The Modern Frankenstein literally came out yesterday, which is my current thing that I'm drawing with Paul Cornell writing. And it's a 5-issue complete story. The book's available pre-order now. It's a twisted horror, which is my first foray into horror, but the twisted romance side, not so much my first foray. So if you like a bit of twisted romance and gore, then check that out. Twitter's probably the best spot at the moment, because my website is very old. I am on all the things, Instagram and Facebook and stuff. My name's weird enough that if you Google Emma Vieceli, you'll probably find me.
I remember you saying, I read in his view when you said people used to call you Vermicelli.
Yes.
First thing I was like, don't say that.
Emma Vermicelli. Vermicelli, pizza. I've had a lot of those names. The Italian Stallion by some confused people. But sorry, we must stop. I'll leave you on this, that Vieceli is not a good name to have when you're growing up in England because it rhymes with many things, like has a big belly, is very smelly, all that kind of stuff. And then during my university years, I actually worked for Border Television, doing like a kids like little magazine show, kind of doing birthday cards and music videos and things. But it was Border Telly, and this was up north, so far away from home, where I thought it was safe for this. I was like, it's Emma Vieceli from Border Telly. I was like, I hate my name. So,
I sympathize. I had a kid when I was really small in primary school. There was a girl in the last year of primary school called Eve, and I was in a big primary school, and I was sometimes dragged. I was very small, dragged bodily through the school to hold hands with Eve. So it was Adam and Eve.
Oh, cute, but also not.
Yeah, I think it's where I started hating people.
But we appreciate my weird name now. For many years in comics, it was spelled all sorts of ways. It's only really been in the last couple of years, finally, people seem to have realised what my name is. So, yeah, it's good. It's good having a weird name now. Well, thank you so much, guys. That was a long old chinwag.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I hope it's been in some way enlightening and not just me going blah, 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 which often...
Fantastic.
No, cool. I think those the chatty ones, like when it's just natural conversation, are usually much more popular than just A, B, C, D. So,
not that we have any like that.
No, but thank you so much.
We're all
for
very
coming.
Solitary people. We like talking when we get the chance.
But thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, everyone check out all of our stuffs, Emma's stuff. And then we'll be back. This is going out on Monday. We'll be back on Wednesday for the hobby stream. And I don't know if we're doing a RPG next Friday. So
wow, you guys are busy.
But until then, thank you very much. Goodbye.
Oh, thanks so much, guys. Bye.